One of the big problems with the Arab-Israeli conflict right now is that nobody really understands still who the Arabs are, because we've gotten a lot of mixed messages just trying to understand. Some say that they descend from the Canaanites. Some say that they descend just from Arabs. Some say that they descend from the Philistines. And who knows, I think some even say they might be related to Amalek. Certainly the behavior of October 7th was Amalekite in nature, because the Amalekites' nature is to attack those who are weak. And that's what happened on October 7th when children and innocent civilian people, 3/4 of everyone killed on that day was a civilian completely, not even like medical staff. So it was about, taking people out when they were weak. Okay, so if they're Amalek is one thing, but that's very controversial to say because there is a commandment to wipe out Amalek. But the definition of Amalek is the person who would take you out when you're weak and target the weak people like the elderly or children who are, when we were coming out of Egypt, that's who was trailing behind us, and that's who Amalek attacked. And so we were commanded to never forget Amalek and never forget that story, that they attacked the weak among us, and therefore it was commanded of the Israelites to wipe out Amalek. And this is why the first king of Israel, Saul, is taken down from his post as king, essentially, and the spirit moves to David, because he was commanded to wipe out a Amalekite settlement, and he didn't. And so Samuel, the prophet, came and killed the king of the Amalekites himself. And so this idea of wiping out Amalek is a commandment in the Torah, but it's been used to accuse the Israelites or the Israelis or Jews of genocide against just Arabs or just, Muslims or anything like that is insane. But definitionally, it applies to Hamas, those kinds of people who would create the plans and then carry out the plans of the events of October 7th, 2023. So it's very confusing because the Arabs or the Muslims or the Gazans or the Palestinians, if they want to be called, but of course this name doesn't apply, and they know that that's not an ancient name. That's a name that stems only as far back as the Romans, which is when the Second Temple was destroyed in 70 CE. The Romans conquered Jerusalem and they want to rename it so as to disconnect the land from the Israelites who had ruled there for 1,000 years in the First and Second Temple periods after returning from slavery in Egypt with the complete nation and after the revelation at Sinai. So it's very confusing, and people don't really know who they are and what they want exactly, because those who are trying to wipe out Israel, it's clear what they want. They're the enemies of Israel, and they just want to kill all the Jews, and they want to have, perhaps if they're radical extremist Muslims, they want to have control over Jerusalem because they believe that it's theirs. But of course it isn't. And if you know any of the ancient texts, starting with the Bible, like any of the Bible, any of the books, and if you know Jubilees, then you know very, very clearly that this land, of course, belongs to the Israelites. That's who the land was set apart for. That's the whole story of God and Abraham. I mean, all the Jews and Christians and Muslims look up to Abraham. And that's why the Abrahamic faiths and Abrahamic religions and Abraham Accords are so significant, because it's people understanding that we are one community and we are one family. And we are, in a way, one religion if we can get past the little crinks that divide between the religions, which are traditions and perhaps different debates that need to happen. But at the core is an understanding that there is one God, and an understanding that Abraham was close with this one God, realized this one God, and passed down traditions that had been passed down to him from Shem and Ever and those who came before us, all of the ancients who passed down the wisdom of the ancients. And through Abraham, we have a lot of wisdom, such as the ancient Book of Creation and a lot of the basis of what forms the tradition of Israel. Basic laws stemming back to certain holidays, the Shabbat, very important, and basic commandments like not to eat blood, not to eat from an animal who is alive, things that are really, really critical to the tradition. And then God picks Abraham's family and his son and his grandson, all the way down through Moses, and chooses Moses for a very significant role in which God takes the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt and gives not just the Ten Commandments, but the revelation at Sinai. This is a divine revelation that occurred not to one person, which is what happens in many other traditions. And thank God, that's prophecy, and that is the chosenness of individuals to bring messages into this world from God. And that's all the prophets. But a revelation at a national level only occurred at this time, in that place that we are aware of. And so God brings the Israelites together, and there is this revelation at Sinai. And this whole story of the Israelites and the Bible and Jubilees make the story very clear, because now we have to again figure out who are these people trying to fight us, because not everyone wants to fight us. Many Arab, Muslim, Christian, Bedouin, Druze live within Israel proper and are happy to be and are participating in society there and have equal rights, and they're very happy there. They're not trying to move anywhere. They're very happy to be minorities in Israel. But the people who are fighting Israel, so who are they? So if they're Canaanites, Canaan was one of the sons of Ham. And in Jubilees, in chapter 8, when Noah divides the earth among his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japhet, because they are fighting with each other, and he wants to assign them all plots of land, and they all make an oath in front of an angel, and they say that anyone who breaks this oath will be cursed, and they choose lots, and the middle of the earth goes to Shem, and the cold areas in the north to Japheth, and the hot areas in the south to Ham. And so Canaan is one of the sons of Ham, and he's supposed to have all the westernmost part of Africa. But we learn in Jubilees, we read that Canaan decides to settle in the Levant, in the area of greater biblical Israel, which is from Lebanon to the river of Egypt. And so Canaan goes and settles in that land, and his brothers tell him, you're cursed. And he is indeed cursed. And that's why the Israelites come and conquer the land from the Canaanites, who are doing bad things and cursed as it was. So if they want to be the enemies of current Israel, Canaanites, then they don't belong. They belong in West Africa. But if they want to identify as Philistines, Philistines came from Crete. And before they were in Crete, which is known as Kaftor in the Bible, and there are multiple allusions to all of this. This is all clear throughout tradition. So the Philistines came from Kaftor, and the Kaftorites and the Philistines were Mizraimites. They were from also children of Ham. Mizraim is Egypt. Everything west of the Nile River, that there's a plot there that belongs to Mitzrayim, and current Mitzrayim, current Egypt is what it is. It's the borders of Egypt. So that's where they come from. And indeed, many of the people living in Gaza, for example, have last names that point to different places throughout Egypt. So many of them did come from Egypt. In fact, Gaza was part of Egypt for a time. And anyhow, Egypt doesn't want them back, though. Egypt made a bigger wall to block out the Gazans than Israel did, because they don't want extremism, and they're fighting enough of it as it is. The Muslim Brotherhood, which they consider terrorists, and so they've been fighting against them, and they know that the Gazans would be basically just 2 million of that, more or less. That's their education system from before they can walk. So that's if they were Philistines. So if they were Philistines or if they were Canaanites, then they're Hamites and they belong in Africa. And if they're Amalekites, then of course they must be destroyed. And anyone who stays to fight this fight and keeps fighting, thinking that they're going to just destroy Israel, clearly don't know anything about the Bible or Jubilees or God. Ultimately, I mean, if all you know is just the little verses throughout the Quran, if that's all you know, the only book you know, you're not very literate. At this point in civilization, in this point where we're communicating through the internet, to not know that you can also open up a Bible and learn the history from the beginning, from Genesis, is, it's Amalekite behavior. This whole thing of this war, of this endless war against the Israelites at this point is just Amalekite behavior. But I'm not saying they are. Some of them may have said that they are. Now, the other option is that they're Arabs. And if they're Arabs, then just be clear and say that you're Arabs. And you're Arabs, and that means that in the 7th century, there was a Muslim conquest of the land. And that's the earliest time that Arabs came in. These are different races of people. So it's a big, question of identity where a lot of mixed messages are being sent out. And so no one can even, talk to you because no one even knows what you are or who you are because of all these mixed messages. So if you're just normal Arabs who just came from right over there in the Arabian Peninsula, and yes, many last names of people, for example, in Gaza are from Syria or Lebanon or the Arabian Peninsula. So if that's what you are, then that's where you're from. And that means you're not indigenous to the land of Israel. It means in the 7th century, your ancestors conquered the lands of Israel earliest. But really, the majority apparently came when the British Mandate was formed in the early 1900s. That's where we really see the biggest influx of Arabs from Arab countries. And so I'm not going to tell you your identity, and I'm not going to figure out your identity for you. But in order for conversations to be had, and in order for resolutions to be made, of course you have to recognize who we are because our identity is so clear. The Israelites' identity and, our written history, our texts, our ancient texts, our family trees that we've kept meticulously, our history that we know extremely well, despite it being so complex of moving from place to place through the exiles. We know it. We know our tradition. We are the chosen nation of Israel, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as chosen in the Bible, as mentioned in the Quran and Jubilees and throughout the ancient texts. So we know who we are. Who are you? Who are you, and what do you want, and what do you need? Because from the beginning, the Israelites have been ready to make peace. We accepted the two-state solution in 1948. We accepted it many times since then. But ultimately, this is the reality, that when you understand who we are enough to stop fighting us, then you're also going to understand that the land belongs to us. So there is a portion of land that Israel is meant to rule over. And then there's so much other land that other nations are meant to rule over. And Arabs have a large Arabian Peninsula, and now they're throughout many, many countries because they spread Islam. And so this idea that Israelites don't have the right to settle in the land of Israel, the biblical land of Israel, is nuts. And so this already points to the fact that there's no education, because I'm not offending the Quran here by saying that if in 2025, the only ancient sacred text that someone is familiar with is the Quran, you're really missing out, because, different texts are written differently. And the Bible, the Pentateuch, the books of Moses, Musa, are very, very significant and very, very holy, and they should be studied, especially if you know Arabic. Then you can learn some of the Hebrew. There's no reason for this to be some huge tug of war over whose God is it? God is one. There is only one God. And I know this. Do you know this? Because once we know this, there isn't that much to fight over. And we're just cousins, Arabs and Jews, children of Abraham. So you tell me who you are, because it would really help to figure this out. Because either you're indigenous, you know what I mean? But you're not indigenous, because even the Canaanites and the Philistines were Hamites, and they belonged in Africa. The Philistines were belonging in East Africa, Mizraim. The Canaanites belonged in West Africa. So figure out who you are. If you're a mix of things, then all the more so. The land does not belong to you. The land was set apart for the children of Israel. This specific land. Read the Bible. Learn it. God is one. God bless you all listening. This is Modern Jubilees, and we will see you next time.